Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Houghton, and I am a lead consultant from Telstra Purple, living in Melbourne, Australia. I'm an application developer who mainly works with Angular and .NET. And my talk for you today is Easy, Breezy, Beautiful Angular Material. My Twitter and LinkedIn and other socials are up on the screen if you'd like to connect with me. I know we have people from all over the world, and I love connecting with people from all over the world in tech, especially really awesome women in tech for this special International Women's Day event. So I was born and raised in California, and I went to university there as well. And I enjoy beautiful things, like the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge. And working as a front-end developer allows me to make websites beautiful. And I started working with the front end when one of my very first jobs. At the time, I was working specifically with AngularJS because Angular, as we know it now, was not available, but I fell in love with front-end work instantly. And I've consistently worked with Angular, graduating to Angular 2 when that came out and staying up to date with all the current versions. But I'm not a UX designer, nor have I been trained in UX design. I'm a developer. And sometimes I need help making websites and making things look beautiful. And that's where Angular Material comes in. Angular Material can help you make your websites look beautiful when you're programming in Angular. So there's two parts to Angular Material. The first is Angular, which is a TypeScript-based open source web application framework. And it's one of the most popular frameworks for web development, currently behind React and Vue. And I won't go into the details on how the Angular side of things work in this talk. I'll focus on the Angular Material component library. And I hope you have worked with Angular before, but if you haven't, then you should still be able to follow along. And material side of that is short for material design, which is a design language inspired by the physical world and its textures. It's a set of guidelines and components for user interface design. So now both of these things are owned by Google. And being the brilliant tech giant that it is, Google had the great idea to combine the two and create Angular Material. So Angular Material is a UI component library that implements material design in Angular. And it was made by Angular for Angular. So that means it's well maintained and well documented. And I find it pretty easy to use. So in this talk, I'm going to cover how you can get started with Angular Material, how you can customize it to match your brand, and looking at some of the pros and cons of the framework and comparing it to other ones. But first, I want to tell you a story. So I used to work for a bank where the brand colors were orange and white. And it had this monolithic legacy online banking application, one of the most visited platforms by the customers. And it used these colors everywhere to support the brand. The problem with this color combination is it is not very accessible. And so to help with this, the brand team decided to change to a darker shade of orange. The problem? The monolithic legacy online banking application had a crazy mess of CSS styling that was spread across several different repositories. And changing the shade of orange to this darker one took over 6 months. And I know now, over 2 years later, there's at least one place where that old shade of orange still exists. So later on, the design team created a design system of their own for this bank of accessible colors for all their different things and guidelines for how they wanted their components to look. And they wanted this to be rolled out across all the customer-facing sites. And they created a component library to help with the process. But the problem was this component library was designed specifically for the public website, which used Adobe Experience Manager, and it was not compatible with other frameworks such as Angular. So what did this mean for the online banking application? Well, luckily, the Orange Bank was in the process of rewriting that application into microservices using Angular and .NET Core. And they wanted all of the brand new Angular apps to look and feel the same, using this brand and these guidelines, but they wanted them to be built fast. The problem was that the developers were then taking the internal design system and retrofitting it into place. I joined the team and decided this was not good enough. It was causing us more headaches and creating tech debt. The new architecture of the microservices would give us many benefits, but we were hacking together the UI to use this design system they had created. And so it would mean it would still take us 6 months to change to a different shade of orange. So the plans were in place to extend the component library to work with Angular, but this was years away, and they wanted the apps to be built now, and some of them were already in the process of being built. So how did we solve this problem? Well, I did some research and discovered that the internal design language was actually based on material design, and it had many similarities to the material design language. And I came across Angular Material. It was perfect. It would allow us to quickly develop our Angular applications. The component library was already well established, had really good documentation, and it was made specifically for Angular, but libraries for other frameworks existed, such as iOS and Android, that allowed you to implement material design and have a similar look and feel. So later on, if we wanted to roll it out, we could follow the similar kind of methodologies using material design across other types of applications. So this meant that we could create something like this password reset form very quickly using the Angular material components. The Angular functionality behind the scenes and the API calls were still done in the same way, but the layout and styling was a whole lot more simplified. This screenshot is of a fake password reset form that I created with no theme, just using the basic built-in Angular material things that they have. And it's really just combining examples from their website and their documentation. So this is already looking really nice without putting too much work into it at all. But the Orange Bank still wanted it to look like their brand and have that orange look and feel that they designed. And this could all be achieved using a custom Angular material theme. And so I spent a few days experimenting with Angular material and created a custom Orange Bank theme. And after proving that Angular material would allow us to increase productivity while still reflecting our brand, we implemented Angular material across all the new applications that we were building. When the Orange Bank theme was applied to the password reset form, it looked like this. And this is actually a screenshot from their live password reset form that's currently being used in production. I did have to write a whole lot of styles, CSS, SCSS, or SAS, to get it to look like this. So Angular material uses what's called SAS, which is a CSS preprocessor, which allows you to use different variables and mix-ins or functions and other cool features that just pure CSS doesn't have. So I had to really brush up on those skills to get it to look like this. So I wanted to ensure that the hard work that I had put in could be reused by other applications and other teams across the organization. A lot of our apps had similar kind of format with those, the forms and the 1, 2, 3 steps. So we wanted them all to look consistent without having to do rework. So we focused on reusability. We put the theme in a place that was centrally managed by us developers, and we wrote it across teams in tandem with the designers to make sure that we are still following the specifications that they had defined. So we deployed it to a central place as an internal NPM package that each of our applications then referenced. And this could also be achieved using a CDN if you have one. The important thing is for it to be in one location that all the different apps can reference. So then if you do need to change the color, you can just change that variable pretty much in one place, and it can easily be rolled out across all the different apps that you have. So if brand later decide to change it, it would make our lives much easier. So how can you use Angular material? This was an extreme case of how a really large organization where brand is important can use it. But what about for your website or your side project? It can be really great for that as well. It's quick to get started and has a few built-in themes, so you don't have to break out your styling skills to build a custom theme for yourself. So let's take a look at how we can get started. First, all you really need are these two commands. ng new my app to create a brand new Angular app, then ng add Angular material, which adds in automatically everything that you need for Angular material. So I run this earlier today on one of my repos. And these are the changes for everything that was added in automatically. So first it'll ask you about using one of their pre-built themes or using a custom theme. I wanted to start with pre-built one, and it gives you a few different ones to choose from. So I chose this pink, blue, gray one. It'll add in the required package, the CDK, and the material modules itself. It'll also ask you about animations, whether you want things popping up. I said yes, so I added that in automatically for me here. It'll also ask you about typography, which is all the different fonts and the font sizes and all that, and the font type. So I said I wanted to use that, so it automatically put in the reference to the fonts here and applied this class that will apply the typography styles to our full application. And then just some basic styles as well. So I've also set up a Angular app for us, just a basic Hello World app for us to get started. So all it is right now really is just, it says Hello World. I ran the adding in the Angular material module that we saw before. And I've also added in this new file for material module. So what I'm doing here is importing all the different material components, and I'm bundling them up all into a material module, which I'm then referencing in my Angular app here. So what that is doing is exposing all the material module components for our app so that it knows about what they are. And it's already started applying some of those fonts and things that we saw set up automatically for us. So the theme that we chose is actually a dark theme, but it hasn't added that in yet. And that's because we need this class. It's called Matte App Background. And if I add that in, it'll automatically make it darker and start applying the material theme a little bit more. So to add in our first material components to our Hello World here, there's no material components in there yet. I'm just going to go straight over to the docs. So the Angular material docs I find to be really good. They have a whole lot of examples and information about how you can use all their different components. So we're going to go over to the components, and you can here they have information on badges, buttons, date pickers, all the different things they have. I'm going to go over to forms, form fields, because I feel forms are used quite a bit, and that's one of the things people often want in their application. So they have information on all the different things you can use, how you can use the API for things like error handling, and they have these examples already ready to go here. And they'll show you the icons and how the hints and everything work. And you can click on this button here and it'll show you the code behind it. And we're just going to directly copy that and paste it into our app here. Cool. So I've added in these material components. So everything that starts with matte dash is a material component. So it's built in the same way that if you've worked with Angular before, you would build an Angular component. So behind the scenes, it's built in Angular. They also use directives. So this matte input here is an attribute directive that allows your standard native input field to work with the matte form field component. So they're just using the behind the scenes Angular that you might already be familiar with if you're already writing code in Angular itself. If we go back over to our app, we can see that's already been applied here. And it's using the theme that we set up, which has the pink and the gray background. And it has an example of some of the icons as well. Angular material comes with a really good icon pack that you can use that you add in with just this tag matte icon and then the name of the icon itself. So the only styles I've added in so far to this before I started today, I just added in a little bit of styling to make it so it's not squished in the corner. And that's what this class container is, and that's it. So there is no flex layout that is built into Angular material itself. So if you've used, say, Bootstrap before, you might be familiar with the grid system. Angular material does not have one of those. So a lot of times people will use a package called Angular Flex Layout alongside. But I'm just using CSS Flexbox natively here because I don't have much styling I'm going to add. So another common component that people use in material design is a toolbar. So I'm just going to copy in this toolbar, and this has this class called matte elevation. So that gives you that three-dimensional shadowed look. And you can change the index to different heights to make it more shadowed or less shadowed depending on how you want. It also has this attribute color, which is currently set to primary. So your Angular material themes really are focused around three colors. The first is your primary color. The second is your accent color. And then the third is your warning color, which is used for error handling and all that. So right now it's on primary, and I'm just going to change this to accent and save. And it'll automatically change it to the accent color that has been defined in our theme. I'm going to change that back because I like the pink that we have. And just so we can see a bit more of what Angular material looks like, I'm going to copy and paste a whole bunch of components that I'd set aside for us beforehand. So I'm just going to copy these in here, and we'll take a look at them. So you have things like radio groups, you have buttons. It has a whole bunch of different kinds of buttons. The actual components themselves are naturally responsive, but if you, say for these buttons, wanted them to be flexed in a thing together, I define this flex container thing myself. We have matte card is one of the things that a lot of people use. So that's this box here, and you have the avatar, you have the subtitle, title, there's buttons. The buttons have a ripple effect with them. So that's important to know, because when you're defining a theme, which we'll look at in a second, the colors are defined as a palette. And so that's for when you click on this, you can see that ripple effect happening. But they have really good working things like date pickers, checkboxes, standard components that are really nice and easy to use. And we haven't done very much work here at all to already getting it to look really, really nice. But what if you wanted to be a bit more custom, like we were talking about with Orange Bank? Well, that can be achieved through a custom theme. So I have a theme that I prepared earlier for us that I'm going to now copy and paste into our application. Oops. Cool. And before we take a look at that, I am going to also go over to my build definition. So in the automatic setup of Angular material, it added in the reference to the pre-built style here, the pre-built theme here. And so I'm just going to change this to our theme that we just put in. And because it's in the build definition, I'm going to have to restart this. But you can also have the reference to the theme be imported into your styles file, and you can have it be updated at runtime, which is really cool. So then you can connect the themes to a button or a toggle, and you can allow the users to choose which theme they want to use live in your site, which is really awesome. So while that's building, let's take a look at the theme itself. So first, you always need to import the Angular material theming package. So that gives you access to all the different variables and mix-ins that Angular material theming has defined. Then if you want to include the base styles, so you don't want to have to define every single little detail, such as the checkboxes and all of that, you can have it have a default style that it goes to using this include matte core. Then for creating the theme, as I mentioned, it has the primary, accent, and warn, and you're using the palette. So here I'm choosing a deep purple for my primary, a bit of a cyan for the accent. So when we go in the form, we can see that there. And then warning for any sort of errors that we have. There's also palettes for the background. So I wanted a bit of a darker background here. So I've defined that color, and there's different features that you can change to be different things. So for example, the tooltip, which I have somewhere around here, I've made a dark blue. And then the foreground for things like the icons and the text on top of everything, you define it here with these colors. Now for importing that main theme, you have to include the Angular material theme package. mix in, and then you define your theme, whether you want it light or dark, and you pass that in. So you always have to define the primary accent and warning. They have a whole bunch of color palettes for you if you don't want to make up and define your own palette. Now, the other main piece to the theme, other than the colors, is the typography. So the fonts and styles and the different sizes, because that's a big part of material design. And this comes from their documentation as to all the different sizes for the fonts that you can have. And this aligns to the material design specifications. So if you want to change any of those, which I have done here, you will just pass in for each one which font type you want to have, or if you don't pass in a font type, it'll just use the default, and then the different sizes. So over here, I've changed to a different font for my headings, and then I have changed some of the font sizes. If you're looking closely when it shifted over, you would have seen some of the font size change. And then you can include the typography for that. So in addition to that, you can also change the colors or the fonts just on a component level basis. So here I've changed the typography just for the card. So the heading here, I am just using the default Roboto font rather than the one I was using before. So it's a different font. And you can also change the colors on that specification level, or you can wrap everything in a class itself to only define certain bits with a theme for you. I have found that when I was writing this custom theme, it was a bit difficult to figure out what I needed to change. I found the documentation to be a bit lacking in terms of the custom theming. So in order to figure out, for example, which type of typography was used for which piece in the card, I actually dove into the docs, into the source code itself, I mean. So that's one benefit of it being open source, is that you really can go into the code and see what's happening underneath. So if you go into Angular component source material, you'll find everything that you need for Angular material. And if we look at the card as an example, we can go into the card theme and see how the Angular material team has defined it. So it shows you how it's mixed in for the colors, and then how it's doing the card typography. So here I found out that it's using the headline, the title, and the body. So those are the only types of typography that I then used in my custom theme. So it does take some digging if you want to do that customization, but it is possible. So let's jump back over to my slides, and let's take a look at some of the pros and cons with Angular material. So from a pro side of things, it's made by Angular for Angular. We saw that the code is alongside the Angular code, which is really handy. It means it's well maintained and well documented. When they're doing updates for Angular, they often include updates for Angular material as well, such as in version 9. They released a test harness for Angular material components so that you can really easily test those components within your library, or within your application, which is really cool. Material itself is cross-platform. So the material design language, there's libraries available in Android and iOS and a whole bunch of different other places as well. You have the option for built-in themes as well as the custom ones, so you can choose whether you want to break out your styling skills or not. And it's open source, so you have the option to dig into the code when you're not quite sure how things are working or what's going on, which I always enjoy. There's some of the cons is that the documentation for how that custom theming works can be quite lacking. So I really had to do a whole bunch of digging and a whole bunch of figuring out how things work to get that orange bank theme looking the way it did. And if you want to get really advanced with your customizations, it can be quite difficult. There were things that our designers were wanting to do, such as make the 1, 2, 3 stepper little circles bigger and smaller than others, and that took quite a while to figure out how to do. And I had to really get into my styling skills. It can also couple your application. So if you saw in the templates, we're using all the mat dash components and those attributes. But once you start using their API as well in your Angular app for things like error handling or moving the steps, the Angular material library is really integrated into your application. So if later on you decide you want to use a different component library, you're going to have to rewrite a whole bunch of your Angular code. And I think it's not that great that it doesn't have a built-in flex layout. I was initially introduced when I first started writing front-end code to Bootstrap, and I always enjoyed that grid system that it came with. So it doesn't have that flex layout there for you within the app. So you have to decide whether you want to use Angular Flex Layout, CSS Flexbox, or maybe one of the other flex layout systems that are out there. If we compare it to some of those other component libraries, Bootstrap, we've mentioned, is one of the most popular, but it does have a dependency on jQuery, which can create a really big overhead in your application. So I know a lot of people try to avoid it because of that. But there are options out there where people have written versions of it without jQuery. So that could be something you look at. PrimeNG is another component library that I've used before, and it has a whole lot of different components available for you. Has a lot of similarities to Angular material, but different look and feel. And that one also doesn't have a responsive layout built in, so you also have to use a separate library for that for you. Kendo UI is another really good component library. I personally haven't actually used it, but I've heard really good things from a lot of friends and coworkers who have. The problem with that one is it's not open source, so you'll actually need to pay a license for it. So if you're working for some sort of enterprise place that has a lot of money, or just a really good startup that has a lot of money, they want to pay for a license for that one, definitely check it out. There is a free trial if you wanted to try before you buy kind of thing. But the other ones are free and open source, so I always enjoy free stuff. So we've heard about how Angular material can be used in large organizations where brand is important and there's several applications where they want everything to look and feel consistent. We've seen how you can set it up really quickly and how you can use it in an application of any size. We've looked at some of the pros and cons and a quick comparison to other component libraries that are out there. But mostly we have seen how Angular material is easy, breezy, and beautiful. The only question left is Angular material right for you? So thank you. So if you scan that QR code on the screen, or you go to the link up there, it has all of my different resources that I use today. And if you have any questions, please reach out on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm always open to chatting to people about anything tech related, really, or specifically Angular material in my talk today. So thanks for tuning in to Techno Day, and thanks for having me.